Welcome to Round Trip Death and Merry Christmas. Today we're going to hear from a woman named Kat. Because of her near-death experience, she went from atheist to Christian. It's a fascinating story. But before we do, I'd like to ask a small favor. If you appreciate this show and its message, please click over to roundtripdeath.com. In the upper right corner of the homepage, you'll see a little donate button. If you'd like to help us keep the lights on for another season, click there and be generous. Thank you in advance, and now let's hear from Kat. One of the things that I get asked all the time is, don't all the near-death experiences start sounding the same? Aren't they all just people go through a tunnel, head to the light, and everything is bliss? And my answer to that is absolutely not. Every single one is completely different, including the one that we're going to hear from Kat Dunkle today. Good morning, Kat.
Good morning. Good morning.
And before we start, I love the title of your book. It's called, Is It Safe to Die?
Right. Kind of odd, isn't it?
No, I think it's great. It makes me interested. So, and we'll talk about that as we go, but give us a little bit of information about you. You know, where are you from? Tell us about Kat.
Well, Eric, I'm from all over the country. I grew up, my father worked for the Department of Agriculture government, so he was transferred every 2 years. And as a kid, that's kind of hard because you're always going to a different school. The curriculum was always different. So I kind of grew up very insecure. I don't know if maybe the audience, somebody has ever had to go into a new school where all the kids are staring at you and and you're kind of an oddity and you know, kids don't like that. I used to drive my son to school and they'd say, Mom, don't do anything with your hair. It was like, you're very self-conscious. And so growing up, we moved all over the country every 2 years. So that just, was very, very difficult childhood. Also, my father drank an awful lot. I was an alcoholic. My mother was abused by him. And so were my brothers and my sister and I. And so as a child, that was all normal to me. But as I got older, I understood we were pretty dysfunctional.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That's rough. Did you, on the lighter side, did you have any favorite places that you lived?
No, I have one I disliked very much, and that was in Kansas, where I actually liked the state of Washington because I loved being outside, and even in the rain, I loved it. And it's a pretty moderate climate actually, so even in the rain, it wouldn't be that cold. But I think Washington with the water, the lakes and the mountains and the trees, and to be outside was always wonderful. Then we moved from that to Kansas, and in the summertime and got off the airplane, it was 110, I think, and the humidity was the same. It was horrible. I thought, well, maybe that's the heat from the airplane or something, but it just got worse. And there were chiggers in the grass. You couldn't walk in the grass. I don't know, maybe the audience doesn't know what a chigger is, but it's a little bug that's in the grass, and it was awful. They didn't have any lakes and water that I was used to, so I didn't like that.
Because of the contrast. And just so you know, we have a lot of listeners in Kansas.
Yeah.
We have a couple of really big pockets of listeners in Kansas. So shout out to our Kansas listeners, and not everybody hates it there, I'm sure.
Well, we're big Kansas City Chief fans, I'll tell you that. So,
okay.
Love Mahomes. He's a great guy. And and I have a very dear friend that's from Kansas and absolutely loves it. So my experience was just so different from what I was used to, I think. So it wasn't good.
And now you're more of a snowbird living in Washington, but winters in the desert.
That's right. Yes, the Southern California desert. It's beautiful.
Okay.
We're fortunate to be able to do that for sure.
Well, before we talk all about your near-death experience, tease it a little bit with how did you come up with this title for your book?
Well, I wrote a book a long time ago, actually this is a rewrite with a professional editor this time, and being able to really tell some things that I was fearful of telling in the first book. But it just happened. It was something I put in my first book, and sometimes I feel for some people it isn't real safe to die. So because of my experience. So I don't really know how I came up with it.
So there isn't a simple answer to the question then. Is it safe to
Right,
die?
right.
Oh, okay. You're making me a little bit nervous. Well, let's get into it. Let's go back in time. You grew up in this dysfunctional family, um, marital problems, etc. What led up to your near death?
Being from that family, I wanted out desperately and jumped into a very bad marriage to an alcoholic. Of course, that seems to happen, I think, with a lot of people, that they tend to follow what they're brought up with. And had two children. By the time I was 21, ended up with a nervous breakdown and horrible circumstances. And during that time, I had lost all faith in God. During my teen years and in this family, I tried desperately to believe in God, but I just couldn't. Nobody could really give me any answers that made sense to me. It was just have faith. Well, how do you just have faith? I had no idea. And well, show me how. How do I get faith? Well, and so I went to every church I could possibly imagine. Anybody. I was just right for some cult to pick me up, because thankfully that didn't happen. But it was just a bad time. I just did not believe in God. I'd say I was an agnostic because I wanted very much to believe in God, but just didn't. So where I was in these circumstances in Kansas City, one time my husband was passed out in the bedroom. My two sons were asleep, little babies. And I walked out in the living room, looked up at the sky, and it was so beautiful. And I remember saying, just screaming out, God, if you're really there, if you just give me 1 year to know what it's like to really feel loved, because I had never felt that feeling of being loved or loving someone else. And just 1 year, and then just devastate me, take everything away, kill me. I don't care. I just want 1 year out of life. And I walked away because I knew that wouldn't happen. But it wasn't long after that, I packed my sons up into an old beat up car. We left Kansas City and moved to Seattle, where I had some family, but that didn't turn out well. And I ended up in government housing with no food, no money, no furniture. The boys and I would lay the sleeping bags on the floor. There was a gas deal that heated our unit, had a little pilot light down, and we'd pretend that's our campfire, and we were camping, and we'd run through the house because you couldn't break anything, and they loved it. We'd go to the library and get books and play down by the lake, and just life was pretty good, just being out of the circumstances that I had been in. First time in my life I was on my own, making my own decisions. So that was all fine. And I had got a job, and we finally put together a little home there, and life was good. But a lady I worked for decided one day that she had just met the man that I should marry. And I wasn't really receptive to that, for sure. But I got this phone call from this man named Don, and he was so, I don't know, kind or something I was just drawn to. And 28 days after that phone call, we were married by a justice of the peace, William R. Beamer in Reno, Nevada. And he was incredible, the most handsome man that I'd ever known in my life, and had a good job. He had his own car, his own house that he was buying. It was just a great, he loved my sons. What more could you ask for in life? And for the first year that we were married, it was incredible. I would open up the closet, and there'd be china and crystal and things that I never even dreamt of before. I loved my life. It was just incredible.
So you got that year that you wanted of feeling loved, right?
Yes.
How old were you at that time?
23.
Okay, still very young.
Very young, very young. I married when I was 17 and had my first child at 18, and the next one at 19, almost 20. And so that all happened in a very short time. Anyway, we exactly 28 days. We were married on February 9th. So it was exactly 1 year. We went out to dinner and celebrated our wonderful anniversary. And Don had bought a tavern about 6 months prior to that with a friend of his. He wanted to have his own business. He was in real estate before, had a solid job. And I was very leery of this because of the alcohol issues in my family. And but I knew it was his dream, and I couldn't stop that. But I didn't like it. And anyway, he said, well, let's just stop by and see how the business is going. And I was upset about that, but I didn't say anything. And so we stopped by the tavern and walked in, and everybody was gathering around him, congratulating him on his business. And there was a barmaid there that certainly was obvious. She was just flirting with Dawn, and I was looking over there, and he'd be fixing her necklace, and then she was flicking her hair at him, and just, signs. I kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And pretty soon I just got up and ran out the door and just started running, because that's what I always did when I got backed into a corner, was just run. And anyway, we had our first very, very bad argument, and it had been exactly 1 year. After that, my father dropped dead of a heart attack. The business that we had was going bankrupt. And my son, Mark, my middle son, Mark, was hit by a car and killed. It was a terrible, terrible thing, and just absolutely broke me into. So I became very unable to talk to people or smile or do anything, because I felt so horribly guilty. And moms aren't supposed to let their children die, and I just couldn't recover at all from that. And Don one night told me, you have to get out of the house. We have to move on. And I would scream at him, don't tell me to move on. I'll never move on. And I couldn't smile. I couldn't do anything, as the horrible guilt that I had, and losing Mark, I just would never get over. And so he insisted that we go out. And so we were kind of arguing with each other, and got out the door and arguing a little harder, and got into the car. By then I'm pretty much yelling at him. He started driving down the street, and I'm, he says, you just got to move on. And I just came across the seats with my hands, just smashing into his face, and angry, just taking all my pain and frustration out on him. And he took his arm and just swung at me wildly. He was trying to drive the car and pulling it over to the side of the road, swung his arm over and hit me really hard in the side and the back. And I fell over to my side of the car, and was so stunned. And I just told him, take me home. And he did. And I did what I always did. I grabbed the car keys and snuck out the door and took off in the car, because I was so frustrated and angry. And I knew that our marriage would never work out. I was never good enough for him, and all these horrible things going through my head. And we went, I was driving down the road. I felt this intense pain inside of me. I thought, well, is my heart breaking, or is there something wrong with me, or what? And I pulled over and got out of the car. It was pouring down rain, and cars were going by and honking and splashing me. And I was just doubled over in pain. And I thought, I've got to get home. And I got in behind the wheel of the car, and I don't even know how I got home. But by the time I did, my clothes were all undone, and I was soaking wet from the rain, and I was barely crawling up the driveway to the door. And Don was standing there again, of course, so furious with me. And I told him, I said, I tried to get by him. I said, I need to call an ambulance. There's something really wrong with me. And so he softened at that point and said, well, if you're that bad, I'll drive you to the hospital, which he did. And they did not, we're talking back in the late 60s, and they didn't have MRIs and CAT scans and equipment to diagnose anything at that point. So when we got there, they noticed a bruise on my back and asked me how I got the bruise. And I didn't want to tell them, because I didn't want them to think Don was a wife beater. I had come at him, and he was just defending himself from an out of control person. And but so I told them I didn't know, but they said, well, you seem to have some kind of massive internal bleeding, because your blood pressure is dropping, and the blood tests were showing something, and we have to take you into surgery. We have to find out why. And so that happened so fast. I was like, well, who are you? And I don't know anything about you. I was fearful, but I didn't have much time. And Don leaned over the gurney and kissed me goodbye and told me that he loved me. And so into surgery we went. And I remember them putting the mask over my face and thinking I should be going under. And I could see the doctors around me. I could see everything. Then all of a sudden it just got black. but I was still awake. And I just, it was like everything had just blacked out and I couldn't breathe. And I remember the horrible panic as my arms were secured because of the surgery and I couldn't grab the mask off, but it was like being drowned. I was underwater and desperately trying to breathe and could not. And so when I did kind of try to breathe in, nothing would happen. This horrible panic. I just can't tell you how horrible that was. And then I just kind of came out of that darkness into a space, like a tunnel somewhat. And I didn't have to breathe anymore. The panic was still there, but I realized I don't have to breathe. I'm okay. I don't need to breathe. And then I started moving in this tunnel and it was odd. My feeling was that what's happening? And I saw down below me that Don and my other two sons were around a lamp pole and they were crying because I was dead. And I was trying to tell them, no, I'm not dead. I'm just fine. I'm okay. And then this feeling came, they're going to be just fine. And I moved on and I saw 4 people off to the left and they were dressed in street clothes, normal people, weren't angels or anything, but they had these very concerned looks on their faces. So I'm thinking after, looking into near-death experiences, possibly could have been distant relatives or somebody that knew me, but I didn't recognize them. And I passed by them. And all I can remember is that, why are they so concerned? Why are they looking at me like that? And then as I moved on through this tunnel, it wasn't definitely like a tunnel. I felt this loud, horrible noise, like a freight train just right through my head. And then this pulling and burning of a rope through the middle of me, like 100 million miles an hour. And the thought came to me, there is no God. And all of a sudden all that happened, the noise and the pulling through the middle, and it stopped. And I knew that God existed. I knew that as much as I know that my hand is in front of my face right now, or that I'm looking at you. Nobody would be able to come in this room and say that hand isn't there, or that man isn't there that you're talking with. Nobody could convince me of that because I know I'm seeing that. So that's how much I knew that I knew God does exist. And it was this incredible feeling of just this overwhelming peace and happiness and euphoria, or anything word that you could possibly use right now. So, I mean, it was very strange, very strange.
Yeah. So just so I understand, so you went from this scary train noise and rope around you. Was there some kind of a transition? And then all of a sudden you knew about God? Fill in some detail there.
Yeah, it happened with the loud noise and the pulling through the middle of me. And I'm thinking it was almost as if God was pulling out of me all of the hatred and the anger and all of the things that were driving me. It's almost like it was being cleansed of something. And then it just stopped. And then I felt this overwhelming peace, this overwhelming euphoria, just the most incredible feeling I've ever had. I couldn't explain it because there aren't words to explain that. I mean, the Bible talks about the peace that passes all understanding. Well, it definitely was that. I didn't understand it. I couldn't explain it, but it was incredible. And then that same noise came and the same pulling through the middle of me. And a thought came to me, there is no heaven. And this stopped again. And I saw this brilliance, just like a sunburst brilliance. And I was moving towards it. And I knew that I was going to heaven. And the excitement, it was like I could leave my husband, who I adored, my children, who I would die for in a second. I would leave them to go and stay in this place, to be where I'm at right now, and to go into heaven. I would leave them like that. That was how strong this was. And then it just stopped, and the floor fell out from beneath me, and I fell into what I know was hell. I felt the total separation from anything or anyone, and especially God. And I was screaming. I felt the pain of burning, but no flames, because that would have given light. This was the blackest black of anything. It was total nothingness. I feel like it's the black hole in space, maybe, I don't know. But I was falling into this, and I was feeling this pain, and I was hearing the screams of others. I knew that no one could save me from this place, that I was going to fall and burn. And I knew that I had sent myself there. I didn't blame God. Why did you let this happen to me or anything? I knew that I had caused this. I had blasphemed God. When Mark died, and people tried to tell me about Jesus or God, I would scream at them. I'll tell you about your Jesus. Your Jesus kills little children. And I would be so angry. And so, I knew, and I used to call God Ralph. I used to joke about it. And I was just all these horrible things that I turned against God and wanted no part of anything to do with God. So I was falling into this horror, knowing it would be for eternity, that nobody even knew I existed. God didn't know I existed. Nobody knew I existed. And even if they did, how could they save me? How could they throw a rope into here? There's no way. I'm never going to be saved. I'm never going to hit bottom. I can't commit suicide even. I can't make it stop. I'm going to fall and burn in this eternity forever and ever and ever. And I knew that. And then all of a sudden I was screaming, God, please forgive me. I know that you're real. I know you exist. Please forgive me and take me from this place. But I knew it was not going to happen. I knew that. But then it just stopped. And I started going backwards through the tunnel again. And I came to a point where I knew I was going to enter back into life. And I was clinging to this feeling of being with God and wanting that so desperately, but knowing I was going to go back. And I heard an audible voice say, bring people to me. And then I came back through this, some kind of pulling through the opening, and I was in the operating room just screaming, and that God is real, and into recovery. And so that was the experience I had, and it changed my life. I went into that surgery, a confirmed atheist, and I came out a Bible-believing, thumping, on fire for God person, and have been for over 50 years. And I have never stopped one day of my life doing what I can do to bring people to the Lord, because that was what he asked me to do. And it's been my one thing.
I think it's so fascinating that you kept being hit with opposites, right? With these horrible things and then wonderful things and then back to horrible things. Can you talk about that contrast a little bit?
Well, it was wonderful things, and then the horrible thing, and then being taken back away from that. I mean, can you even imagine how I felt coming out of that place, and after knowing that I would be there for eternity? I tell you, so it's driven me. That has driven me for, like I say, over these 50 years. And anybody who knows me, I mean, I'm a normal person. I say bad words when I miss a golf shot, just like anybody else does, I'm not a big drinker, but I have a glass of wine once in a while. I'm a normal person but my life, 100%, any friend of mine, and I've got lots of friends, I'm a very friendly person, knows what I stand for and who I am. And that's a complete believer. And I'm the one they usually call when something goes wrong or somebody dies or whatever, because that's the one hope they can cling to, is that their loved one is there somewhere. And I believe in my heart, I don't think God sends anybody to hell, first of all. I think the blame should go to where it belongs, and that's either to us or evil. I believe that we do this to ourselves. That's the feeling I had. But I believe that God gives everybody this opportunity during the dying process to come to him. I don't believe I was special in any way, or I know I wasn't, but I believe that we all have this opportunity. There is true evil in this world. I think we see it every day. but we think to ourselves, even the worst person, would I want Charles Manson to go to hell? Not really. Not really. Does any human being deserve that horror? But maybe so. I don't know. I'm not going to judge anybody. But so I do believe that during the dying process, because some people have horrible lives like I did that turn them against God, or horrible circumstances like losing a child or a husband or a wife or whatever. And they're angry. They're angry because they think God could have stopped this. God could have, but he can't. He would be going against everything that he stands for and the free will that he's given mankind. And I don't want to preach to you, but I just want people to know that there is hope. I mean, you may have had a loved one that was not a believer, maybe blasphemed God as well, but during the dying process, changed their minds real quick. So that's my belief.
It seems like the forgiveness came really quickly and really easily. Does that seem fair?
Yes. I mean, I was there long enough to make a true believer out of me, but yes, it did come quickly. And the whole experience, I guess, maybe was pretty quick. I don't know time-wise.
Let me ask you this, since you have children, and oh boy, can I ask you to put yourself in the shoes of God for a second? Does that sound too blasphemous or whatever?
No.
I mean, you have children. If they had done something horrible to you, how quickly would you forgive them if they wanted to come back and make their peace with you, with their mother?
Yeah, no, I mean, there is no time limit there. They know they could never do anything bad enough that would turn me away from them.
And is that what you learned about God, doing the same thing?
Well, yes and no, but if knowing that forgiving my children would harm them, if knowing that forgiving my children would dispute who I was as God, then I couldn't. There's only a limit to what God can't go against his word. He can't go against what he is. And I know it breaks his heart. I know that he does everything in creation to stop it. How would you give your son to die on a cross, a horrible death that Jesus Christ did to save mankind? So I think God has done all he can do, and I would do all I could for my children for sure. But if I knew it was going to harm them or go against the creation, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. No one could.
So how else did this experience change you?
How did it change me?
Yeah. I mean, you've given us kind of an idea. What else did it do to help you be different, better, or anything else?
I'm at peace. I'm at great peace. Even the world is a messed up place, and it's not easy. It's not easy. Life is never easy. But it changed me in a lot of ways. One way was that I went to sleep one night. I had a dream about starting a business. I had a high school education. I wanted to go to college, but my father said I wasn't college material and wouldn't help me, and I didn't go to college. So I was bounced from one school to another. So my knowledge and my intellect has been whatever I could absorb from books or self-taught. I wasn't that brilliant person, but I went to bed, had this dream, and I started a business back in the 60s of customer satisfaction. I was in the automotive industry in my job, and I saw customers coming into the dealership that were good people, and I saw they were being mistreated or lied to or cheated, and I didn't like that. So I just started calling them up one day and saying, how was your experience at XYZ Chevrolet? And did I get an earful? And we're talking the 60s, and car dealerships were a bad business at that time. They were, out to get what they could get any way they could get it. And but the owners were not necessarily like that. So I took this information to the owner of the car dealership, and I said, here's what your customers think about you. And he just went crazy. He made me a manager and did all this stuff, And so I took what was happening there And I thought, this is good for every car dealership. And this was all came to me in a dream, showed me how to do this, start this business. So I went out and started knocking on doors. I can make some phone calls for you and tell you what your customers think of you. And here's what customers from XYZ Chevrolet thought about them. And they just went crazy. They couldn't sign up fast enough. And this business grew so fast and we became very successful. All the money problems we had in the past all went away. And the business is still thriving today under my son. I walked away from it one day and took up golf. But he has done a great job with it, became very wealthy himself through it. So God blessed us, I mean, in incredible ways. And so, yes, I mean, I had that ability to do what I did then. I know that came from God. Like I say, I wasn't a well-educated person, but I was able to talk to very well-educated people on their level and make a success of myself. So, and I had feelings for people that I never had before. I could talk to somebody that's in horrible pain and not shut. I don't get scared, or I want to do what I can to say the word that maybe gives them some hope or maybe gives them some peace. And so that desire inside of me to do that, that's why I do these podcasts, or why I wrote my book, and was 100%. No, I don't know if you've ever written a book, but no author makes money. Trust me. It's expensive to try to find editors and do all the things you have to do to make a book good. And if you're famous, maybe you might make $1 or $2, but it's not something you do. And people always think that, oh, you just want to sell books. Well, I don't care if you read it or not, but it will help you. So that ability has come about by the grace of God. So I'd have changed a lot.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that very much. For those people out there that are listening that haven't decided yet, oh, is there really an afterlife? Should I be afraid of death? What do you have to say to them?
Well, is it safe to die?
Yeah, you haven't really answered that yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say this. What have you got to lose? I don't know. There's probably a lot of people that, like me, tried to believe in God and just couldn't find any answers that really made sense to them. And I understand that, but I'm not talking church. I'm talking relationship with God. If you could just say to God, I want to know you. I want to give my life to you. I want you to take over. I'm not doing such a good job here, or I'm frustrated, or I don't understand. Please help me, God, to know you, and lay your life down and give it to him in a sincere way, and just see what happens. I mean, what have you got to lose? And I would encourage people to start searching for answers. And I want people to be careful, because there's a lot of garbage going on out there that people believe in that will lead you in the wrong direction, because you're not God. I mean, some people believe that we have that ability ourselves to become gods. And there's one God. There's one God. And God is spirit, like we are. I mean, I felt my spirit leave my body through my near-death experience. I felt it come back when I was at that point and I heard that voice say, bring people to me. I felt the actual will to live, or call it a spirit, enter back into my body, a physical, actual thing. And then I went through it, waking up in the surgery room. So we are human beings, yes, flesh and blood, but we also have a spirit who's really who we are. That's who we are. This body is going to turn to dust. We know that. Or many people have drowned, or whatever way they have died. In that dying process, there comes a point where the spirit, you who you are, actually leaves your body, and that's, some scientists have called it your consciousness, who you are, it's not your brain activity. They can actually prove, Dr. Bruce Grayson studied me for over 20 years. He's a scientist who just devoted his entire career to near-death experiences and has studied thousands and thousands of them. but there's an actual consciousness or belief or thing, person that comes out of you. That's you, your spirit. That's what lives on in eternity.
Is there any other kind of experience that could have helped you believe in God versus what happened to you? Because not everybody's going to go through this. In fact, most people aren't.
I hope not. I mean, it was a great thing because I don't know why. I don't know why some go through this and others don't. I don't. But like I said, I do believe everybody goes through this during the dying process. I firmly believe that because God, the Bible says that God's no respecter of people. He doesn't choose one over another. So if this experience was something that several of us have had and it leads us to God, which in most cases it does, we're not special. Why would we be chosen to have this happen? So my belief is it does happen to everybody during the dying process. I think does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Going back to your experience itself, you mentioned being in a tunnel. A lot of the time it was just dark. The times that it was not dark and that you felt like you were in a heavenly place, do you remember seeing or hearing specifically anything, or was this all just a feeling that came to you?
Well, there was that loud noise that preceded everything,
Yes.
the three things. It was that horrendous noise. I liken it to a freight train, standing right next to a freight train going by is what I would say it sounded like. It was that loud. And so there was that noise. And what that represents, I've never been sure. The speculation, my feeling maybe that God was just tearing that hatred and that anger and the garbage out of me through that I don't know. Something was being torn out of me. Something was being pushed out of me in a way through that, pulling through the middle of me, through my heart, just pulling that out.
Interesting. And you did mention seeing 4 people that you didn't recognize.
Yeah.
And you've speculated who they are. Maybe they're ancestors or something, but you don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. My son had died. I didn't see him, and I'm not sure that I would have wanted to, because I would not have wanted to disrupt where he was. I wouldn't, knowing where he is. I mean, how could he see me? How could I see him and ever live normally ever again? So I didn't know these people, and a lot of other people do see other people, loved ones that they've lost. But I know where he is. I know that my life here is a flash in the time of eternity.
Now, you've had a lot of time to think about all of this, so I'm going to ask for what may be a little speculation on your part. But some people that have near-death experiences have a choice on whether they want to come back or not. It sounds like you didn't. You just were back in your body. First of all, why do you think you didn't have a choice? And what do you think the choice might have been if you had one?
Well, I definitely would have stayed. I definitely 100%, because like I said earlier, I would have left my children, my husband, to stay there. I knew that this was for eternity, and that my life going back would be just a short time. My personal self wanted to stay, and my choice, I guess, would have been to stay, because I knew that my husband and my other 2 sons would be okay. I was given that reassurance when they were the first thing I saw as I went into this experience, where they were standing down by the lamppost and they were crying. And that reassurance, they are going to be okay, came to me and was so strong. I knew they would be just fine. They would move on through life and be just fine. So yes, I would have stayed. Can't remember what the first part of the question was.
Why do you think you didn't have a choice? And I think maybe you've kind of explained that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. They say the choice would have been to stay, but I don't remember any question or that was even, God wanted me to bring people to him. It was just given to me that I was to go back, and I was to try to bring people to him, which was like, oh my gosh, when I did come to my senses, when I got out of the hospital finally, because it was a long rehabilitation, I was very, very ill. Anyway, I thought, how do you bring people to God? What am I going to do? I was not brought up in a Christian home or a Buddhist home or whatever faith people have. I was not brought up in religion or faith or anything else. So how am I going to bring people to God? So I would tell them about my experience, and I didn't bring anybody to God. I scared them half to death, So it was like, I don't know how to do this. God, help me, But that morphed into being able to comfortably let people know who I am first, and then maybe telling them my experience or doing what I can do. So I learned over time what to do.
Have you found that people are more accepting and believing when you explain it to them now than many years ago when it first happened, when near-death experiences, I'm putting this in quotes as it's been termed, hadn't even been, wasn't even a thing that people talked about, didn't have that name yet?
Right. Yes, it was, I remember my grandmother calling me up, because I told everybody about it. It wasn't something that I hid for sure. And I had changed. When I got well enough, I went to Catholic church, which I'm not a Catholic now, but I went there. It was the only thing I had ever known from my mother. Every single day, they had a 6 o'clock mass. I was there at 6 o'clock in the morning, whether I was sometimes the only person in the church. And I would pray, and then I started going to this evangelical church because I wanted to learn about God, and I didn't learn anything in the Catholic Church. I mean, it was a structured thing, and I could still have feelings for God, but I didn't learn anything. So I started learning about the Bible and about Jesus Christ and all these things. I could not get enough.
Well, before we wrap up, what's a message of hope you can give people that are listening today? How can you make their life better today?
That you have a choice in this life. I mean, none of us get through this easily, and we all die, and we all come to an end. And it's a good thing to be prepared for that, to understand it, to do the best you can. And you can do that by simply praying, by simply asking God to help you and to become that believer. And it's the process. I mean, it's not something, sometimes the light bulb just comes on for people, but other times it doesn't. And so I would ask you or challenge you to take my words here today. Just lay your life down, give it to the Lord, and just see what happens and try to follow that. I mean, you're going to see the light as well as I or anybody else if you will just lay down your human objection to God and wholly give yourself to him and just see what happens. I believe that he'll guide you as he did me.
Thank you. I appreciate your words today. Thanks a lot, Kat.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you again for listening, and just a gentle reminder about donating to the show at roundtripdeath.com. Until then, Merry Christmas, and I wish you everything good that you're looking for in this life and the next.